working in that type of setting is not going to be good for me.
Right.
So I need to be in a setting where I have more control over the choices that I make and the work that I do. It's a little early, but that's fine. I'm wide awake, ready to go. And rather than focus on what was negative, I focused on 5 areas that were common to people that would help them in their job search efforts. So they were self-confidence,
Exactly.
perseverance, acceptance, resilience, and finally a commitment to the job search and yourself.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 2020. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, be yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
Have you ever felt lost in your career path, unsure of which direction to take next? Well, look, welcome to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones, and today I'm talking with my special guest, David Petrovay, who has over 20 years of experience in career counseling and coaching, making him the perfect guy to help navigate these uncertainties. From working in schools for the blind to authoring 3 insightful books, David's journey is a testament to the power of perseverance and self-discovery. Welcome, David. How's the day treating you?
Oh, so far so good, Lee. Yeah, it's a little early, but that's fine. I'm wide awake, ready to go.
Yeah. And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Bend, Oregon.
Where's that at?
So this is Central Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So we're considered high desert. So
Okay.
When you go to the coast, you get rain. When you are here, you get desert.
Okay. Well, I'm in the desert too. I'm in it's called Marietta, California. So it's deserty, not the desert, not dunes like, but really
Right.
hot. So this is Hindsight the Podcast. So before we get started and talking about all the great things that you're doing right now, kind of just want to know just a little bit about you and your journey. And so if you can just talk a little bit, and we'll ask some questions later, but just what makes you who you are today?
So I think, as you pointed out, Lee, this has been a long journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first began my career, the word that I used in a previous podcast was I was clueless. No idea what it was that I wanted to do. All I knew was that I was college level material.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, my major came from my mother. She said, excuse me, I think you should be a marine biologist. Well, I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We were far from the ocean. Why she ever came up with that, I don't know. But I pursued that. And after my freshman year and the grades that I received in chemistry and biology, I thought this is not the right path for me. I need to be headed in a different direction. So I chose psychology because I always had an interest in people and what made them tick. Okay. So I pursued that. And at the University of Pittsburgh, it was very biologically based. So we looked at behavior and why people did what they did. And then after that, I thought, okay, what's next? I just finished an undergraduate degree. Mm-hmm. And then I received a letter from the College of Special Education. They were looking for teachers. And I thought, oh, this could be the next step in my career. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed with every department that they had. And when I arrived at the last department, it was the one that was education for the blind and visually impaired. Wow. And I thought, I could do this. Mm-hmm. So believe it or not, that master's degree was about 9 months in length because they needed teachers badly. Mm-hmm. So one of my positions was to work or actually do an internship at the School for the Blind in Pittsburgh. And as a result of that, I was offered a job. So I stayed in that position for 7 years as a teacher, and then moved to Arizona and worked in various capacities there as a teacher, as a counselor, as a school administrator for 22 years. Then I thought, it's time to leave this. What's next? So California came up as an option. Mm-hmm. So I transferred to California to their School for the Blind and worked there for 5 years and said, you know what? I've done this for 34 years. It's time to consider another position. Mm-hmm. So I looked back at what I had done, and I think that's important for people to look back at where you had successes and capitalize on those successes. So for me, it was the career counseling that I did for a number of years in the school. And I thought I could turn this into a regular position.
Yeah.
Well, easier said than done, because, it's the old, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it must be a duck.
Right.
So everyone looked at me as an educator,
Right.
not as a career counselor. So I had to make inroads into that. So I joined an organization that was volunteer, and they gave me the opportunity to work with other members of that group and provide career counseling for them. And I thought, this is really good. So that led to a position there where they offered me a part-time job. And then after about a year and a half of that, I completed my doctorate and was saying to myself, is this what I want to continue to do? To have other people basically, identify my life and what I can and can't do. Because a lot of it was I would offer them these suggestions for what the clients were telling me, and they would say, that's not your job. But then they would turn it over to someone else to do. So I thought, no, it's time for me to consider opening my own business.
Yeah.
So I did that back at the end of 2008, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's led me to where I am today. So that's my story.
So first of all, Pittsburgh. I just told you before we started it, I went to a game. It wasn't a Pittsburgh Steelers game, but I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. So,
Oh, good.
So there you go. That's neither here nor there, but I like to put that in there in every episode that I can. So, marine biologist. Now, you said your mom brought that career up for you, and you realized that wasn't for you.
Right.
And then you went into some educational type things. And you did it for 34 years. So can you share like a pivotal moment when you realized that career counseling was your true calling? After you did so many years in this educational or teaching, positions.
I think what happens is you develop this innate feeling of I'm done.
Okay, there you go.
I've reached the end of this part of my career, and what's next? So then, as I said, we look at where our strengths and successes were, and that's where they were for me. So then it was an important part of identifying, well, how could I do this? And career counseling seemed to be the best way for me to use those skills and experience. So that's where I decided I'm going to open my own company. I had never had experience with running my own business. So I had to start from scratch with that.
Yeah.
And basically I do all the roles that you do in business. I do the bookkeeping, I do the scheduling, everything that needs to be done. And I've learned from that.
So the reason why I asked that question, I told you I have a military background. And when people are coming out of the military, they tend to, all right, what do I have strengths in? What are my skills from the military? But you're not necessarily limited to that. It's almost what do I have skills in? And then what is it that I really, truly want to do in my next act?
That's right.
So for you, what I was trying to get out is that the career counseling was something that you were drawn to. Like it was something that you were passionate about. And though it didn't align, some of it did, but though it didn't align with the teaching roles, you did have, I believe, you mentioned it, you did have some soft and some hard skills that were translatable to what it is that you wanted to do. Plus, without putting words in your mouth, you were also passionate about doing this. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. And I think the passion is important because that's what will maintain your trajectory.
Right.
Just knowing that this is what I want to do and being willing to overcome any obstacles that are in your way to get there. Yeah.
And how did your early family experiences like shape your perspective? Because your mom said, you're gonna, I don't know if she's like, you're going to do Marine, or if it was, hey, I recommend that you do this, right? But how did those experiences, and maybe even before you got to the point where you were going to actually look for choosing a degree or path, but how did that early family experience shape the perspective on your career choices and your educational choices? You've done a lot.
Right.
You got your PhD and you've done a few different career transitions. So did anything from your early years kind of shape how you view your path forward?
Well, living in Pittsburgh, obviously back in the 50s, it was a steel mill town. So many men, okay, when they finished school, went and worked in the steel mills. But I thought, no, that's not what I want to do in my life. Most of my relatives, including my father, were blue collar workers, and they stayed in those positions for years. And again, I thought, no, that's not the best use of my talents. So I had very little guidance. In fact, I was just thinking, Lee, as you were talking about this, even in high school, I was in the academic track, but no one ever sat down with me, none of the guidance counselors, and said, David, you'd be really good at, because they didn't know who I was. I don't know how they did their jobs, and there weren't that many students,
Yeah.
but clearly did not say to me, you've got these level of skills. This is what we've seen in you. You may want to consider. And so it's interesting that I worked with the blind, because most of my career I went into blindly, and
Nice.
just, would have the experience and make a decision. In
Yeah.
hindsight, as the title of your show goes, that this either was or was not the job for me. And when I worked with the blind, when I was in Arizona, I was designated the Worker of the Year. So obviously someone was acknowledging what my abilities were.
Yeah.
And so even with that, I thought, okay, that's a wonderful achievement, but okay, it's not enough for me to continue. But I did continue for about 8 years more in that field. And again, I went to the point where I thought,
Goodness.
you know what? I'm burning out in this. That was the other thing, because one of the last things I did was a presentation. And I had done presentations before that were very well received. This one absolutely bombed. And I realized that that was the point at which it was time to seriously consider the direction I was going in.
Okay.
Yeah.
What type of presentation was it?
I was talking about how to create a program that would benefit students and focus on their needs. And for, I think, 5 summers, I had done a classroom program, and it was very well received, and people wanted to know what I did. But as I said, when I got to that presentation, I was so burned out. It had no life to it.
Right.
And that was a measure of what was going on within me. I had no life left within me.
I got you. So what were some challenges that you faced when you transitioned from working in schools for the blind to your current role as a career coach?
Yes. So, Lee, what I had to face was finding that niche where clearly I was comfortable and I was skilled and experienced.
Yeah.
So I tried 2 different positions. The first one was working with individuals with disabilities. These were adults, to help them identify their career path.
Yeah.
And I was very successful with that. However, what I found again was I was limited in what I could do. And so I thought, no, this is not where I need to be. So after a number of months in that position, I left. And then I was doing some volunteer work, and that in a career one-stop.
Okay.
And so at that point, I did that for a number of months, just volunteering. And they said, hey, you're really good at this. You may want to consider applying for a position. So I was what they call a drop-in career counselor. So people would come in, and it was a triage. And I would have 20 minutes to work with these people to get them on their path, which was really not enough time.
No.
I could just get them started. And I received very positive feedback from the people that I worked with. And then I thought, once I received my doctorate and I was not going anywhere within this organization, that it was time to look at what my other options were. Yeah. And that's where I thought, okay, I think I need to start my own business.
Okay. It's funny you talk about being limited, and that's kind of why me and my friend Eric started Hindsight the Podcast, because when I came out of the military, I had some experiences in, especially with transitioning, and it was, mentally taxing. And I used to talk to a group of soldiers, airmen, Marines that were getting ready to transition out. But I was limited to only doing it maybe once or twice a year.
Mhm.
And I felt like I had so much to say at the time. So we were thinking, well, what is a way that we can do it on our own time, on our own schedule, put the messaging out that we wanted to? And that's where Hindsight the Podcast was really born in those early days. So I definitely, you have a lot in you as a person, right? And when you go to these different jobs, like, you are super limited in what you can do. And it's like, but I have so much more. I have so much more to offer. Just give me a shot. And sometimes they will, and a lot of times they won't. So I just wanted to make that comparison. And probably a lot of people who are listening or watching feel that way. You're limited in what you can actually do. And you get chastised for doing great things, but not in the scope of your work. Actually, that's a good point. I was going to say that's neither here nor there, but it's actually a very good point.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
I think, Lee, one of the points that I want to bring up is
Okay.
one thing that I see within working with my clients and my own personal journey is I wouldn't say importance, I would say the influence of politics. There's a lot of politics that goes on. And I worked in the schools, and I didn't think that was an issue, but it was super heavy loaded with politics. And the people at the top have agendas. And it's a matter of whether or not you are willing to fit into that agenda for them. Because I was told when I was a vice principal that there were people that I supervised that the school wanted to get rid of. So they said, it's your job to get rid of them. And that was not why I wanted to be hired.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it, but I was not particularly satisfied with that.
Right.
I think that was also a driver as to what caused me to make other decisions. Because in what I do now, I can let clients go if it's not working for them, but that's not the same as changing a person's life.
Exactly. I definitely understand, especially when it's not coming from you.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing a horrible job, like, I think we need to get rid of this guy or do some retraining or something. But when it's coming here and you're not even seeing it, it's just an agenda. That's a hard pill to swallow. Absolutely. So yeah. I get that.
So I think for people making transitions, it's important for them to identify and do their research on the organization that they want to become a part of, and to talk to people who work there, particularly about the politics.
Yeah. And that's super easy to do these days. You can go on LinkedIn and reach out to individuals and have conversations without being too prying. When people are willing to talk, they're probably not going to give you the full, because they don't know you. They're probably not going to give you their full feelings, but they can give you an idea of how that business is from their perspective anyway. Absolutely. That's a good point. So you wrote some books.
Yes, I did.
What was the inspiration behind the books on employment changes and journaling?
Yes.
For transformation. So what are the name of the books and what were the inspirations?
So the book that I just released was actually a second edition.
Okay.
And it's called Out of Work, Not Out of Worth, Navigating the Emotional Side of Job Loss. So, people will tell you, well, as soon as you no longer have that position, just get out there and start applying. Well, it's a matter of what your mindset is as you do that. Have you let go of what caused you to leave that position? And what can you learn about yourself in the meantime before you get your next position? So a lot of it is introspective, where you look at your strengths, you look at your support systems, you look at everything around you. And where this came from was back in 2013. I did a workshop for a group of people, and they were all job seekers. And the title of the workshop that I did with them was Getting to Up from Down. And it was about the depression, dealing with depression during their job search. And so they shared with me what they were going through at the time. And I was busy writing it all down on a whiteboard. And I took that information and asked myself, what do I want to do with this? Because this is like gold. And then I did another workshop, and it reinforced what I had learned from the first one. And rather than focus on what was negative, I focused on 5 areas that were common to people that would help them in their job search efforts. So they were self-confidence. And that's one of the areas that I see people are just dealing with, grappling with as they leave a position. It's a blow to their self-confidence.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we do in this country, we identify who we are by what we do.
Exactly.
So then it was perseverance, not giving up. Then it was acceptance of what had happened. Then it was resilience, how to bounce back. And finally, a commitment to the job search and yourself that you are going to move forward with this.
Yeah.
So I created the content along with exercises for people to do within each of these areas so that they could then take that information with them and use it in moving forward. So that was the first book. The other one that was just published recently is an accompanying workbook. So it just summarizes the chapter or the section and then provides extended exercises for people to do.
Yeah.
So you can either use them together or you can use them separately. Yeah.
Nice.
And then the other one is every day I post a blog on my website. And what it does is encourages people to look at the positive side of their life, not focus on the negative. And so that title is called Ponderings, Daily Reflections for Inspiration and Transformation. And what we want to do is to be transformed.
Yeah.
We no longer want to live the life that we had in the past if we have the ability to change that.
That's awesome. I tell you what, I'm a drop something I don't ever talk about, or I haven't talked about to date. I was working on a book too, and I think I may have to read your books first because it kind of aligns. So mine is called From Here to There, and it's about you here, but not really. It's almost like your journey.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm here, but there's something more that's calling me. There's something else. And there's a transformation that needs to happen in your mindset. There's a transformation in your habits in order to get you to this where you're supposed to be or where you're destined to be. And just hearing getting to Up From Down, I love that title, by the way. That's pretty amazing. But understanding that you need to know who you are. And a lot of times we don't know who we are because we define ourselves, like you said, by what we do. And that's not necessarily who we are. So, yeah, you didn't spark my interest. I'm going to have to go in there and check these books out and see what you're writing about. And maybe I can throw some of the quotes in or some of the findings that you have in my book. And yeah, I love it, though. I love it. So first time I'm saying this, it's a book coming out pretty soon. I'm very far into it.
Good.
So look forward to that as well.
So mine was a long journey in writing the book. And that
takes a while. Yeah,
it does. It does. And I say, writing the book is actually easier than marketing the book. So yesterday I was doing a book signing at a local bookstore. So all the ways that I can get that book out there to people who need it. And I'm in the process of writing 2 more books. And I never saw myself as an author, Lee. In fact, when I was a freshman in college, I was told by the teacher, you're not a writer.
Yeah.
And so you don't listen to that. That's just their opinion.
Right.
And so I started writing, during my doctoral program, and I started getting different feedback from the teachers that I had, the professors, saying you are good at writing and you need to be publishing. But it took a while to get there. And I had to find a topic that I was passionate about. Because writing a book is like going into a marriage. You have to be committed to it.
Yeah.
And to say, this is an important message for people to receive.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the process of writing 2 more books. Now, this one's a little different because I'm co-authoring this one. And it's about being stuck in some aspect of your life. And we've identified 5 keys to unlock being stuck. And so we write about that, one in a nonfiction book, which is more about here are the steps that you take. And it could be used by, people who are working with individuals who feel stuck. And then from that, we're creating a fictionalized book based on stuck being on trial. So we've given stuck a name.
Yeah.
And it's very organic. So we've broken all the rules for writing a book.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, we don't have an outline. We just let it evolve, and it's
Yeah.
so much fun.
Okay. Okay. And how far along are you in that process?
I would say with the first book, it should be out by the end of the year or the
Okay.
beginning of the year. And then with the other one, we don't know how far into the book we are.
Yeah.
It just, like I said, it just keeps
Got you.
evolving. And we think that it's probably going to be a series of books when we're done.
Wow. I love it. I love it. And that's, of course, the fiction one.
Yes, that's the thing.
So you get to have some fun with that one. I love it.
Oh,
I love
yes.
it.
Yes.
All right. All right. So I'm glad one more time, give us the two names of the titles for the books.
So the first title is Out of Work, Not Out of Worth.
Mm-hmm.
And it is Navigating the Emotional Side of Job Loss. And then the other one, and that's a workbook that accompanies it. So you can do either one or both. And then the other is Ponderings, Daily Reflections for Inspiration and Transformation. Now, the fun thing about that book, Lee, is that the way we use it is that you just open it to a random page. And you always find that that page is exactly what you need for the day.
What you're looking for.
Yeah.
I know that's right. Oh, you're not even what you're looking for, what you need. I love
That's
that.
it, right? What you need.
That is cool. Okay, ponderings. I like it. Okay. So, all right, let's bring it back again.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the books. How has your work in diverse settings from schools, private practices, how has that influenced your approach to your career in coaching?
So every one of them has been an experience
Yeah.
to apply what I've learned from that and what people need. And so it's interesting that we're writing a book about stuck. And what did all of these individuals have in common? They were stuck. And they needed to have someone provide a path for them to become unstuck.
Yeah.
So that's really what the focus is. And when I work with my clients, it's like, what are you dealing with today that you're stuck with?
Yeah.
And how can I help you move beyond that?
Right.
So that's the exciting part of what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some common mistakes that people make when they're choosing a career path, and how can they avoid them? So what are some of the common things that you see that people just habitually make these bad choices?
Well, I think part of it is not doing their research.
Okay, that's a good one.
Because it's also looking at the patterns of the work that you've done that have not been successful for you. So I know someone who has continued on a career trajectory where it's the same situation, only the environment changes, and gets into the job and says, oh, I'm so excited about this. This is going to be different. And in a few months, they find out, oh, it's the same.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with the same problems, only in a different setting. And then they lose that motivation, and they are either let go or they quit. So it's really looking at those patterns. Now, what do they have in common? You. So there's something about the choices that you are making and being willing to look at those and say, maybe this is telling me that working in that type of setting is not going to be good for me.
Right.
So I need to be in a setting where I have more control over the choices that I make and the work that I do. And I think as we become older, we've developed those experiences that tell us we need to move into higher positions in order to use that.
You do.
You do. And because this one person was in a situation where they were placing her in work that was far below what she was able to do. This is what she did when she first started working. And now she's had all these years of experience. And guess what they do? They put her back in those positions because that's what they need. That's their agenda.
Yeah. Oh, good one.
Yeah. So it's important to look at writing down, this is where I worked. This is what it was like for me. What are the patterns that I see among these positions that I've held? Why did I leave? That's the other one.
Yeah.
What caused me to make a decision to no longer work there?
Right.
And once you see those patterns, you say, what can I do to break that pattern? Because that's what I had to do. Was to say, people were telling me from above, you are terrific at what you do.
Yeah.
But the people at the administrative level of the school didn't want that. They didn't want me to outshine them. And at one point, there was a position that was an advisory position from a national organization. And they identified me from a group of people as being the ideal candidate. But I had to get approval from the school because it involved some travel. And when that was presented to the superintendent, he said, no, he's not. We don't want him to take that position. So you can imagine how that felt.
Yeah.
So that was one of the definite reasons for me to reconsider leaving that school.
Right.
It
Right.
no longer fit who I was.
Yeah, that is an important one. I'm sitting here just thinking of some of my experiences, but I won't bring them up because a lot of times you get excited because you're doing the same thing and you're good at it because you
Right.
do it. But now here's a challenge, and it's something that you're excited about, looking forward to, and you need blessings from above, and they don't have that same passion, or they don't have that same motivation to send you on this new path. We need you right here where you're super good at. And that can be demoralizing and definitely bring that morale down, your own personal morale, and maybe even the morale of the whole department that you work in.
That's right.
Because it's gonna filter out. I was thinking about when you said, getting to higher positions, or at least climbing the ladder a little bit. But sometimes you feel complacent. You feel good, like I am good at what I do. But then there's always it's my God-given right to complain, right, about the boss or whatever. If you are able to start making that climb just a little bit, then you have more freedoms and you have more opportunities to really let yourself shine. Wherein you may have someone who's above you, if you don't try to make that climb, who is very interested in them shining and not you. It's a lot. And understanding that in those politics, how to play it, navigate it. I know people don't like when I say it, play the game, but it kind of is a game because someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. So knowing how to play the game, what the rules are, is important. But go ahead.
So I think you just brought up a good point, Lee, which is a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
And when you find yourself in a losing position, that's telling you something, because that other person wants to win at all cost. And that's their agenda.
Yeah.
And so I tell people above you are in positions of power, and they will use that power in either a positive or a negative way. Right. They will use it to encourage you or to keep you diminished. And when you feel diminished, as you were saying, it's very demoralizing.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask yourself, if this is a game, do I really want to play it? And for me, the idea of, not playing it meant opening up my own business, because I report to me. And my days are the way that I want to construct them.
Right.
So it can be as early in the morning on Sunday as we're dealing right now, and that's fine. And I also have a client later today on a Sunday. And that works because, again, I'm helping people to be the best version of themselves. So I think that, it's an option for people. It's not for everyone, by the way.
Yeah, no.
So you have to look at that and whether or not you're willing to commit to the time that it takes to build your own business.
Yeah.
And then for me, it's looking at the lanes that I have. And one of them, you look at, so what is it that I do? Well, I'm a career coach. I'm a speaker and an author. So I look at each of those lanes and what I'm doing to help to move those forward. And right now it's about speaking. And I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of podcasts, and they're wonderful. And then what I'm doing now is to take the podcast and it goes on to my website.
Yeah.
So it promotes not only me, but the host. There you go. It's a win-win.
So now we're going to switch again. I like talking about wins. And one way that you can win is to continue to learn, lifelong learning, professional, personal development. So what role does lifelong learning play in career development, and how do you incorporate it into your coaching?
So we look at, what someone may be dealing with and how they can address that. Now, in some cases, it might be finding a mentor, someone who can help guide you that's already been there. It can be taking classes, because many of these organizations offer free classes. So I have someone who is currently struggling with sales. So I said, you can find a mentor, someone who's good at that. You can go on those classes that they offer online. There are certainly books out there that you can use as resources. But, it's always identifying what steps can you take to be better at what you do. And in my case, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm 75 years old. And I just signed up for another course that has a certification attached to it.
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh, that would be really good to learn and incorporate into what I do.
Right.
So it is looking at the work that you do, and then how can you move yourself forward?
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah, you're never too old.
Yeah. The one thing, and you've done it in your career, the one thing that I used to have, and I still do, have difficulty with in lifelong learning is that I'm all over the place. There's so many things, and it's so easy to get the information nowadays with computers and TV and classes. That's pretty traditional. But there are a lot of ways. So how do you talk to your clients about maybe kind of tune it in or hone it in or finding out what it is, and this is part of my book, by the way, that you're aspiring to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 1 year from now? What do you tell them? And I'll tell you what I usually talk about.
So one of the things that I ask them for, Lee, is what is your goal? What is your intention here?
Yeah.
What is it that you're hoping to achieve based upon where you are today? And I think that when you set those clear goals, they have something to work toward. And I set goals for myself. And what I'm learning is that idea of a 5-year plan in today's day and age, it's something that you might aspire to, but there are so many changes that are taking place, especially in the workplace, where you have to be flexible. That's, I think, the resilient part of what I write about in my book. So how can you use who you are to navigate those changes that are taking place?
Yeah.
Because something that might be popular today, 5 years from now, that's in the past. And so something new has come up. I think with the idea of artificial intelligence, the role that is playing in what people do, it's amazing. And how to use that as a tool, let's say. Well, 5 years ago, we didn't deal with artificial intelligence. So people didn't have that in their toolbox.
Yes.
And so what else is going to come up as a result of our technology that people will want to incorporate? So it's always about, yes, have a plan. I think the 1-year plan is probably more realistic for people.
Yeah.
Because they're living within that framework. But, what we find is companies are dissolving. We find that big companies will do a reduction in force. Just had a friend in a huge company where she had unbelievable experience and they let her go.
Yeah.
And her whole department was let go. So you never know what's going to happen. So actually, it's always being prepared. The best advice I ever received from someone was always look for the next job. Because the one you have may be not the one you keep.
Yeah, I give you that. So, I agree with everything you just said. I was interviewing another special guest, and they talked about their through line, which is kind of like their purpose in life. And finding that through line or that purpose kind of helped them to get to know themselves, because they had to go through the exercise of figuring out who they were. And once you figure out who you are and not what you do, then you can kind of project a little forward and see, well, what is it that I aspire to be? And it's not necessarily I aspire to be a instructor or a coach, but I aspire to be a person who is in a position to help individuals and blah, blah, blah. You can go down that road. And so that way you're not really limited to, okay, I want to be the CEO of blah, blah, blah. I want to be this. I want to be this. And look at, because that's just a job. That's just a position, but it's not really you. So what is it that you want to be, or where do you want to be? in a year, 5 years. And that helps to flesh that out, if that makes a little bit more sense.
It does. And I think you brought up a good point, Lee, with our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing a presentation for college students and saying, identify your purpose. And I gave them a list. And it was more generic because the purpose is not to become a CEO.
Right.
That may be a goal that you have.
Mm-hmm.
But what would that role be in terms of how it affects others? Maybe your purpose in life is to accumulate abundance financially.
Absolutely.
That can be a goal or a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, if you're too specific, what we learn is that those purposes change as you grow.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a career trajectory in terms of when we're in our 20s. Our purpose is to identify and build a career path. And then as we get to the top of that curve, it's to identify what it has done for us in terms of our own growth.
Yeah.
And then obviously, because it's a curve, there's a downside. And that downside is what leads to the end of the work that we do and what our life will look like after we're done working. That's going to have a different purpose, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's really where you are in your life and what that means for you in terms of what motivates you to get up each morning.
That's it. All right. We talked a little bit about writing stuff down, journaling. And you know what? I got some little books, right?
Yes.
And I said, I'm going to start journaling. So I wrote this thing, and I gave, what my expectations are of myself and how often, the cadence and blah, blah, blah. And I got that one entry in there. And that was like 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to write like every day. So barring my failure right now, currently, as far as journaling, how can journaling be a powerful tool for career inspiration and transformation? Maybe that's the part that I'm missing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So, in the journal that I have there, it starts with a paragraph for the day. Let me see. I don't have it. Oh, let me get it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is randomly, choose a passage. And 7 billion stories. Every man, woman, and child on this planet is currently writing their life story. Each story carries with it a personal message of love, hope, fear, and achievement. Some stories are longer than others. Some are based on thriving, while others are based on surviving. Their stories are often a continuation of the stories of those who preceded them. How can they not be? Our stories contain elements of those who have taught us in ways of being in the world. They may be our parents, grandparents, teachers, or society as a whole. Who you are as an individual contributes to the uniqueness of your story. You each have the power to affect its content and direction. This is accomplished through your free will. Given the power that it offers, how are you using it today? How would you feel if after you completed this lifetime, you had an opportunity to read your own autobiography? What would it say about the way you lived out the gift of being here? Remember that you can alter the content and direction of your story at any moment you choose. What would the story you are writing about yourself say to you and the world? Now that is a random choice, and I think it's perfect for what we're talking about today.
Right. Wow, it's exactly what we need.
Yep. So again, they always end with a question, and then a journal what your answer to that question would be.
Something to contemplate and write down.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna give you something hard.
Okay.
Let me give you something hard because you've been whizzing through these answers. What advice would you give, or do you have for someone who is considering a major career change but feels overwhelmed by the process?
Okay. So that is actually easy. You begin by breaking it down into what would be the first step that I would take. Okay. And you keep it simple. So the first step that you would take would be listing the jobs that you've had. That'd be the very first step. Pretty easy to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Second step, what did I love about each of these jobs? What was my challenge within each of these jobs that made it difficult to show up each day? So you begin to look at those steps. Pretty simple, okay? And then you go through the process of using that information in terms of where could I apply what I've learned from these steps? Oh, that's something that I could do in the field of. So I think you would want to start broad and then narrow that down as it matches what your answers have been. What are my strengths? What are my interests? I mean, you may have strengths in an area, but not use it. I'm really good at balancing a checkbook, okay? And when I do interest test, accounting comes up. I took an accounting class, by the way, and didn't even finish it. And I thought, and I was doing okay in it, but I thought, this is not who I am.
Right.
But again, it was trying things out.
Yeah.
I think the opportunities to do things like volunteering, a number of ways in which you can experiment with whether or not that would be a good fit for you. And then you're going to either say, you know what, I tried it. It was great. I need to pursue this. Or I tried it. No, thanks.
Yeah.
It's not what I want to do in life. I could do it, but I don't want to do it. Right. And then there's your personality type. And you said, I'm all over the place. Well, guess what? My personality type, that is characteristic. Because they said, well, when you're trying to identify your topic for your dissertation, good luck.
Yeah.
Because I want to do this, and I want to do this, and that looks interesting.
Yeah.
We're everywhere. And so really narrowing down that choice and then writing a dissertation based on that. Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. So look, I asked you a lot of questions and thank you for sharing. But is there a particular career, personal, transformational, transitional related topic that you're passionate about that we haven't covered yet?
No, I would say that we've pretty much covered all our bases. And I would say that, if you're in a position now and you're wondering what its future is, there's some things to consider. Things like, what is my relationship with my supervisor? Are we in sync with one another, or we're definitely at odds with one another? And how is that reflected, for instance, in the performance evaluations that I have? And it's interesting. Some people can have terrific performance evaluations, and then they're out of work.
Right.
So, but it is one way to do it. The other way is if you're not being included in the information loop, if you're being left out, those are the things to look at as possibilities that, I may be on my way out.
Yeah.
So those are just clues for you. And then what's next? Always be looking at what's next for me. Do I want to continue working in the same lane, which some people do, and that's fine? Or is it time for me to branch out and try something different that's going to be more in alignment with who I am and what I'm capable of? Because oftentimes, Lee, people don't give themselves credit for having the experience where they can be successful in doing something else. But definitely you want to do it in something that's related, where you have those experiences. You don't want to be, I was a car mechanic and I was very good at that. Now I want to be a surgeon.
Yeah.
That's quite a leap for someone to make. Not impossible, but unlikely.
Yeah.
So how do you take it basically to the next level?
Okay. I love it. Thank you. And David, how can our listeners connect with you, learn more about your work, check out your books, talk to you about coaching? Like, where can they reach out and find out stuff about you?
So I just launched a new website, which explains all of this. Awesome. And it's davidpetrovaycoaching.com. So they can go on my website. It has, how to connect with me. They can watch the different podcasts, including this one. They can watch it as many times as they want. And then they can read a little bit about my background and what we do in coaching. And it's an excellent way for people to reach out to me And I do offer a free consultation. So no cost, just to see if we're a good match in working together.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so one-stop shop. Just
That's
check
it.
out check out the website. And David, thank you so much for sharing your incredible journey and insights with me today. And from navigating career transitions to the power of journaling, your experiences and advice have been invaluable. And for our listeners, make sure to let me slow down. Make sure to subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast so you won't miss any upcoming episodes. And thank you for tuning in. And I look forward to having you join me again next time. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.